say. Let's see if there's an indication of any. So all in favor? And as the motion is approved, as all are in favor of approving the agenda as it's been circulated. So next we look for info of our previous meeting minutes, and we had meetings on September 22nd, September 29, and October 8th. So we could have one motion or separate motions for the approval. Move for approval of all the meeting minutes noted. Is there seconded by the Deputy Mayor McGee? Discussion of errors or omissions? There's no indication of same, so all in favor? And all have indicated approval. So the motion is carried and those meeting minutes are approved. We don't have any public hearings presentations to receive today, so we can move right into the sixth item on our agenda, which is entitled Correspondence, Petitions, and Proclamations. We have some items of correspondence for our information. Firstly, we did receive a letter of appreciation from the Lunenburg Academy Foundation, speaking to our ongoing work, and they've recognized our leadership and financial support of the Lunenburg Academy. There is a boardroom brief that was provided for us by the staff of Region 6. It's very informative, I find. These briefs are new development of Region 6, and they are intended to be short form, but giving information in a very, I guess, user-friendly manner. And so I hope everyone's had a chance to read that, and they're great for the public to better inform themselves as well as to the function of Region 6. Number C, 6C, letter of appreciation from Hewitt Hardiman. He was our representative volunteer of the year, and there was recently a provincial online ceremony to recognize all of the representative volunteers throughout the province, which was well done, and we were very pleased to have Hewitt represent our community, and he did so very well. And his letter of appreciation is noted. And I just want to further comment that we always have we always like to be able to fully as possible recognize the volunteer component of our community in a civic reception that's typically held in April. And that, of course, was initially postponed and now has really been canceled in the format that we are used to doing it. But we will be recognizing a number of individuals who were nominated for recognition this week, and we'll be posting something online to share with the community to help us recognize and demonstrate appreciation for these very dedicated volunteers in our community. The next item of correspondence is the NASCAD Lunenburg Residents Program Notice. And that is provided for our information. And we have 3 new artists coming to, or that have now arrived and are in our community, and we welcome them, and we look forward to doing a formal welcome, or that they will appear before council in coming weeks to introduce themselves, and they will be introducing themselves throughout the community in the months ahead. We have looking quickly to try to capture their names here. Jessica McLaughlin, Sienna Neba, and Undine Folds. So they will, I'm sure, correct my pronunciation of their names, which I may not have done justice to, but we nonetheless are very happy to have them in the community and look forward to what they can produce and offer in the months ahead as part of the NASCAD Lunenburg Residence Program. Number 7 on the agenda is business arising from the minutes and unfinished business. And under the heading of corporate services, we have first of all a discussion of policy 84, fleshing out of that, and it is with respect to councillors' recognition of years of service. And there is a staff report provided for our further discussion and consideration. And as we move into a discussion on that agenda topic, I'm going to declare an interest in this discussion. But I first want to say that in so doing, I think it is an important discussion to have. I've certainly been a part of discussions in previous years as to how to appropriately recognize retiring members of council, and it's been difficult without specifics to go by. So I think it would be very helpful to establish more concretely some parameters that staff can work with in appropriately recognizing the service of members of council. And certainly we have some very long-standing members that deserve recognition of some sort. Also, I would like to state publicly that I've asked that I not receive a gift of any monetary value or that requires an expenditure of the town. And but that's just a wish of mine personally that I just wanted to make clear. I have spoken to staff and other members of council about that previously, but it's anyway, something I felt it was important to state at the onset of this discussion. And then so doing, I will step away from the chair and ask the deputy mayor to step in, and I will let the discussion carry on from there.
Thanks, Your Worship. You could argue that we're all in conflict on this for the next little while.
Well, I wanted to declare a conflict as well.
Yeah.
My name is mentioned several times in the report, so I'll declare a conflict.
Yeah, thank you. So that leaves the 4 of us. Your Worship, it's you're probably right, and we need to sort of maybe formalize a little bit better, the process. But I'm not sure that we could have that conversation today unless somebody wants to make it a conversation. I think the staff has come up with a couple of options there, which maybe we're just passing the buck to the next group, but that might be the most realistic thing to do now. Maybe it should be at the start of the term that we're talking about this instead of the end. But we'll just open up for conversation, or shall we start with a motion? Or I look to the 4 of us. Peter?
Well, I'll start the conversation. If nothing else, just when I look over the 2 options there, as well, I guess I'm looking more at what's done for town council and based on town staff. They are very similar, actually, when you kind of sum up the length of time that a typical councillor may be there. I don't see any reason why we may not look at incorporating that first. It states here the councillor recognition of the years of service policy 84 indicates that any non-returning councillor who has served a full term in office shall be presented with a gift that shall be a town of Lunenburg flag or a gift equivalent. Any non-returning councillor who has served more than that term in office may receive additional recognition gifts. Okay, so then I sort of went down. I read it, I guess, kind of amalgamated it together. So, a flag has a value of $95, so that's like $25 a year, right? So that's kind of would be, anything beyond that, you receive your flag, and then anything beyond that, you could base it on something like that line. Does that make sense? Just to start the discussion.
Not?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think option 2 seems the most sensible. I mean, there's $5 difference, so who cares? But just thinking about those of us who, you know, those members of council who are elected in by-elections and such, do we count? And it's just, you know, I'm not invested in this one way or the other, but $25 a year, do you count 3 years as a full term? You know what I mean? Somebody gets elected on the last 2 years of council. What does that come in at? Is it prorated? Is it whatever? Like, I'm fine with however we resolve that, but if you're doing it by term, you know, you have to factor in those people who wouldn't have served a full term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, like, yeah, when you look at the two options, then, like, you know, it's, you know, in Councillor Cross' case, it's a difference of $30, right? So they're both very similar, the two options.
I thought, are we content with policy number 84 the way it is? Or I was suggesting earlier, this may not be a good time to sort of look at changing the policy, but are we just looking at just either option 1 or 2? Is that what we're kind of restricting ourselves to, Peter?
Well, I think whatever we sort of choose here should be perhaps incorporated in the policy for future, you know, for future use. What I was thinking.
Matt?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and staff are free to correct me, but the reason that we're having this discussion is there aren't clear guidelines in the policy.
Mr. Chair, is open for consideration under exceptional circumstances, terms of more than 1 year, that it could be considered, so council has to come up with some possible scenarios. And using the personnel policies as potential guidance. So that's why it came before you. But I don't think there's anything prescriptive. It's at your discretion if you choose to change it now or not, or in the future.
Ron?
I'm not sure how much we really need to change the policy per se. My biggest concern or want out of this process going through was, especially with Councillor Croft's position of having served over 20 years, I think more than the customary $95 flag or gift would be not quite appropriate. So, and again, the mayor having 2 terms as mayor and 1 as councillor, I think deserves a little bit of extra recognition. So that is allowable under the policy number 84. For me, it was just as much of trying to get a feel of for what these 2 individuals would consider appropriate or what they may like to have. I don't think they're going to go over and above what they think would be certainly appropriate. But for me, it was just for them to have a little bit of an input into what they may or may not like. So for me, option 1 or option 2, again, minimal in dollar value change. My biggest concern is getting these 2 special individuals the recognition they deserve in whatever form they appreciate.
Matt?
I'll move option 1.
Peter seconded, thank you. Peter?
Just further on in this, it's, again, you know, it's always a dilemma for council to have to sit here and reward themselves, right? So
Yeah.
that's why I think it's important that whatever we decide here should get incorporated into a policy of some sort. That way, I mean, every 4 years we're going to have this discussion. And I always do like the little clause that always says, you know, if there is something, you know, distinguishably different. I mean, you could have an absolute outstanding council or an absolute outstanding mayor for a period of time, right? That would need special consideration. But at least this is a guideline for the average, you know, the average term, the average council, you know, sort of thing, right? And it's embarrassing having to have this conversation all the time.
That's right.
So I'm just doing it for the sake of, you know, future people that come behind me. Let's do the right thing so they don't have to do the same embarrassing conversation.
I'm not sure how we'll work with, so you're just average, so we're just going to give you this. You were here for 15 years. You were just average though, so. However, if we are in keeping with policy number 84, with option 1, wouldn't that be sort of just, maintaining the precedent, I guess?
Well, what option serves us best for long-term policy? Before we go to that example. Which one of those options would serve the policy long-term? I look for even B to help weigh in on this, right? That would help us. Which, from a staff perspective, which one do you think weighs in better for policy?
I think option 1, and you would just clarify clause 1.2 under section 2 procedures. So then any additional terms would be valued at $95, whether or not you want to put a CPI indexer on that, as we often do, because sometimes a policy doesn't get revisited for years, and 4 years could go by, and inflationary indexes could affect that. And that would certainly help to simplify things if that helps address that. And you may also want to put in there, to your question, the additional provision that if you have a town-issued iPad, cellular phone, that sort of thing, that is also sort of gifted with you on your retirement. And because they have a very diminished value, I think it's $100 or so. And you could incorporate that quite easily into a third paragraph.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because sometimes we found when we have to go and wipe a device, or it's quite problematic for the individual counselor to do that if there's some personal or business things that are reasonably permitted under our IT use policy. It's just very time consuming, and for the diminished value of the asset, it's just better to allow the individual to take that with them. And we have purchased new iPads for this council because these ones, some of them are 8 years old. Does that address your question?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I think the electronic part is an excellent idea as well, yeah, to have that incorporated.
Can we capture that in the motion as an amendment by unanimous consent?
Now, were you calling for the question there?
I just wanted to capture that because it wasn't in the original motion. And I assume it's based on unanimous consent that none of us object.
Yeah. Would we consider adding the electronic stuff into policy number 84? Would we consider that?
Just one last question.
Well, should we? I'm not sure if we need to do that in order then. Yeah, before we pass option 1. Or do we pass option 1 and then we make a motion to change the policy?
I can very easily draft it to your worship to be inclusive, to roll that all in and make the policy amendments with the assistance of Ms. McCollum, and we come forward at your next meeting with those amendments then to begin the process of formally ratifying the policy.
Is that okay with the mover and seconder? Okay, any further discussion?
Just to B's other point about inflation indexing, that might be a good thing to include as well.
Any further discussion? Ready for the question? All in favor? Nobody opposed? And we probably spent more time on that than we spent on an $800,000 fire truck. So, good job. To you, from failing hands we throw.
Thank you, everyone, for taking over, Deputy Mayor, and for that discussion. And so we will can move on then to 7A2, which is Luna's Coastal Action Foundation Board membership and bylaw update letter. And it's further to a discussion we had at a previous meeting, and just really looking for some clarification on where we were with that. It wasn't clear from those minutes what council's wish had been with regard to appointment to that body. Because there was lots of discussion in support of the value of service on that body. So I think that we were just looking for some or there was a need to have some clarification. If everyone recalls the situation, they've updated their bylaws. It's not a requirement of theirs that there be a formal appointment made from our council. They did suggest it would be lovely to have people, but from our council process, it wasn't clear what this council had felt was the best way forward. So I'd like thoughts on that for clarification to staff, please. I noted that it wasn't included in the policy bylaw that, or the policy, not the bylaw, the policy that we passed with respect to committees at our last committee meeting. It was dropped from the chart that listed all of the external appointments that council did make. And I think that was the thought at the time, that it wasn't something that would be done as a matter of course for council, that there would be an appointment made to that organization. But again, if that's not what council had intended, then perhaps that policy needs to be, or that chart of the policy, which is really the only place it's included, would then be updated to put back that little block for an appointment to BACAP. So, yes, Council motion.
Well, I guess my question would be, how do we know there's an opening on their board? I mean, if we're going to be, representative there, it would have to be an opening on the board. It must obviously have limits.
That is true. I guess we would not necessarily know that without the requirement. So, good point.
So would we make known that, our council would like a seat on the board? Is that how I would interpret that then, I guess?
So look to staff, but yes, you had recently served as deputy mayor, so you may be able to provide some input.
I guess two thoughts. I thought that they were fairly clear in any discussions that they were getting away from the council appointments. But that said, the second point I would make is I'm sure they would love to have somebody on there. If anyone on council, whether here or Mullen Bay or whatever, wanted to volunteer, I'm sure they'd be welcome. So I think we've taken it out, and I think it needed to be taken out. So it's fine the way it is.
So the suggestion that someone from council may want to be included would be not necessarily a matter of course then, or expected from there, but maybe a welcome opportunity. So would we just leave that to the discretion of an upcoming council then, and leave it as is in the policy currently, that it's not a formal appointment? Is
up to the individuals, I would think. I think that they're, I don't know if their policy has a limited number of directors or not, or whether it's, as available. I don't know.
typically there's a maximum, but it could be quite generous. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, yes, sorry, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. For my part, I'm the deputy mayor. If somebody wants to do it, that's fine, but I think we leave it undesignated as a council appointment. I don't see the need to make a formal council appointment to that board.
I would suggest that's the normal course of business. Normally we don't, unless a body specifically requests and council deems it appropriate, we would normally appoint someone, but if it would, as the deputy mayor said, if it's a particular interest of a person who also happens to be a member of council, they'd certainly be free and welcome, I'm sure, to volunteer for a board position. But I guess we just needed clarification on that point, because the letter was a little bit confusing too, in that it did invite the continuation of that. So yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. Then I'll move that we cease having a council designated appointment on that board. Just to clarify.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion then? Councillor Bachman, thank you. Any further discussion? And the motion is clear for staff. So all in favor then? No one is opposed, so the motion is carried. Thank you very much. Next item of business is another policy or bylaw governance updating course of housekeeping, matter of housekeeping. So looking for the repeal of bylaw number 6, committees and boards bylaw, which has been replaced by policy 98, and first reading in public as advertisement, second and final reading after advertisement. So we are at second reading for that, Ms. Renton. Could you clarify, please?
It's for first reading.
Okay, it is for first reading.
And then, which would include thereafter the public advertisement. And then the 14 days after lapse. And then it comes up for second and final reading and further advertisement.
Okay, so we are just at the first reading stage. It seems like we've seen this for a very long time on our agenda, so I apologize for the confusion. But there is just, we are at just first reading of the repeal of that bylaw. So yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Worship. A question through you to staff. Are we likely to be able to finish this up before the changeover of term? And is there any legal prohibition on the next council being the one, like having first reading under one council and second reading under another?
You will probably not finish it within your term, but you can at least start it by giving your first reading notice of public advertisement that this is under consideration. And then presumably at probably the November 23rd council meeting with the new council, it would be voted on at that point in time for second and final reading and implementation.
And there's no prohibition on that kind of term?
No, on
Okay.
spanning the 2 terms, no, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Ideally, it of course would be wrapped up now, but there's some advertisement requirements and you can't expedite them, so.
And I think it speaks to the matter of the form of the process is to allow ample time for review and discussion, and those, whether in office or not, would have an opportunity to look at this carefully and weigh in. So, and we need a motion or just a notice?
A motion, your worship, a mover and seconder to give first reading and public advertisement.
It is a bylaw, sorry, thank you.
So
Yes,
moved.
so moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Croft, that we give first reading of the repeal of this bylaw number 6, and that a public advertisement for second and final reading be undertaken. So any further discussion? All in favor? And no one is opposed, so the motion is unanimously carried and approved. So next on our agenda is 7A4, the Comprehensive Community Plan Steering Team and Municipal Planning Strategy Land Use Bylaw and Subdivision Bylaw drafting. So there was some information provided in the agenda package with respect to the steering team work and what they were asked to do in our original the terms of reference, which was drafted for the CCP and particularly for the steering team as well. And the purpose, I think, primarily for having this on is that we have reached a plateau or one certain level of completion of this Project Lunenburg, of this effort. And the steering team has done a phenomenal job of being engaged citizens and have guided the process to this point in time. However, we are coming to a change of council and also a dramatic change in the work of the consultant team who's been hired to carry out this work on our behalf. We had, of course, anticipated in drafting the terms of reference that the project would be completed by the end of this council term. And unfortunately, that's not obviously happening. And the PAC, Planning Advisory Council, plays a significant role in the upcoming next steps in the process of Project Lunenburg, which is the development of a new municipal planning strategy and the revision of the land use bylaw and subdivision bylaw. And I really was concerned that there be some clarification of roles with respect to the steering team. And I think it's out of respect for them and their time and out of a recognition of the increased responsibility of Planning Advisory Committee in overseeing and doing their statutory duty, that there not be unnecessary overlap and that there be a clear understanding of the roles of all involved. Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I appreciate the concern. For my part, the way I understand it and the way it's drafted in the terms of reference is that the steering team is responsible for the overall project completion. And from the get-go, that was not a role of determining what the substance was. It was a quality assurance and sort of keeping things on track role. So for my part, I had the same thought, and then on looking at the terms of reference, it seems to me that it makes sense to keep the steering team in place. Adjusting for membership is required based on who gets elected and who doesn't. And obviously the substance as legally mandated to go through public participation and first reading or information meetings, and the process that brings the documents to council is for the PAC. So it's in my mind that the designated responsibilities are a form versus substance issue. So I don't see why we would eliminate the steering team at this stage before the completion of the project. But it's up to other councillors to express their view.
I would, not seeing anyone anxious to jump in right away, I would appreciate some input from Ms. Sutherland. I guess I'm wondering about what the, what steering committee meeting agendas would consist of over the next number of months, and how their work relates to what Planning Advisory Council Committee team does, and for clarification. Right. Thank you, Worship. So you're correct. The steering team was mandated to, first of all, be an overseeing body, so quality control of the whole process, right from the beginning to the end. Milestones met, any decisions that had to be made that weren't substantive, they would do that. One of their major roles was to provide a recommendation to council on the comprehensive community plan. So that's their role. The role of the Planning Advisory Committee is similar in that they make a recommendation on the planning documents, so the MPS, the municipal planning strategy, the land use bylaw, and the subdivision bylaw. The Planning Advisory Committee would be the host of the public information meeting. They would be playing a key role in the public engagement of the planning documents, where the steering team would still be doing the oversight. So are the milestones being met? Are they providing a quality document that are in keeping with the contract? So the steering team would be more oversight. Is this within the contract? Is that not within the contract? And when I did the comprehensive community plan, I took the contract that was signed, and I made comments all the way through. Have they met this? Have they met that? Have the upline met this criteria? Have they met that criteria? Those are the types of things. So it is different in like. The Planning Advisory Committee makes the recommendation to council on all the planning documents. They're the lead there. And in the past, the steering team did oversight and the recommendation to CCP. Now they won't have that. It would just be only oversight. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your worship, it does seem a little odd that maybe the steering team would be doing oversight on a draft land use bylaw, and yet I think there's value in continuing it, and let's see what kind of input they could have into it at some point. But I agree that it's going to be the planning advisory committee that sort of takes over at this point. And so what would they do? I mean, maybe we need to find out, see what kind, because I think there's a lot of expertise there that we, you know, as far as why the land use bylaw and planning strategy are what they have drafted. So I wouldn't want to disband them at this point, you know, but maybe after we get the draft from them, maybe it goes to both the steering team and the planning advisory committee. No, and it's confusing, I know, but.
Yes, Councillor Sir.
Thank you, Worship. Well, it wouldn't be up to the steering team to oversee the planning documents. It would be up to them to oversee progress reports and benchmarks and consistency with the contract and that kind of thing. So PAC would obviously take the lead on reviewing, you know, the land use bylaw, the municipal planning strategy, the subdivision bylaw. The steering team would be the lead on, are these things coming in when they're supposed to, and that kind of thing. So to me, it doesn't seem, I'm not confused about it after having looked at the terms of reference, but like, I don't think it's appropriate for the steering team to participate in the process of getting the land use documents forward. That's PAC's exclusive jurisdiction. It's their job just to keep the project overall on track. The steering team, that is.
Yes, Councillor Baldwin.
I guess that's part of where I've got a bit of concern is what is the responsibilities of the steering team going forward, and how much input are they going to have into the document that's being worked on by Uplands, or are they just basically a time manager? If they're just holding them to task as far as being done on time and that kind of stuff, I see them as being okay, but I'm not so okay with them having input on input in the document, how it's going to be.
Councillor Mojo.
Well, as part of the committee, I don't think we've ever had input in what goes into the document. So it is like a time management thing. That's how I see the role of the committee. So it's probably a good idea to keep them up and running so they keep Upland on task, or at least keep council informed that they are on task, I guess, and meeting their timelines and deadlines.
I mean, I guess partly of what has raised the alarms about this is that they have put in a great deal of time. The steering committee, especially the citizen volunteers, were at all the engagements and actually helped the functionality of those. I'm not quite sure how our consultants would have accomplished what they did without the assistance and ready help of the volunteers on our steering team. So they're a very engaged group. I would hope that would, you know, their engagement and interest and contribution to as citizens to the document would continue, and it would certainly be most welcome. And I think they are more than anyone else in the citizenry interested in the outcome. So I would encourage that, and they are all, you know, their input is much welcome. And perhaps better placed as far as content at this point in time. And so I think that's a matter of part of why I'm bringing this up. I don't want to waste their time and something that, you know, coming to meetings where they're not really contributing. At this stage, we have a limited number of things to contribute, and they do have oversight by our staff and by, you know, simply what the job requires, what they're contracted to do. So I don't want to waste the time of our valued citizens being part of a committee that they can't contribute to. Also, if we look at our variance report now, that's before us for further down on the agenda. And I mentioned the time factor as well. We had really charged the job to be finished at the completion of this term. We had an extended period over 18 months of citizen engagement and very limited time allotted for actual production of the important documents that are intended to guide council in future. And right now we have expended over close to our total. We have something like 30-some thousand, we'll see in the variance report, left to complete this large portion of the deliverables, and that's a concern. And I'm not sure what input our steering committee can have to that at this point. I think that's the role of the incoming council, to be responsible for making sure the job gets done as was contracted. And I say incoming council because it is actually, of course, beyond our capabilities given the election at the end of this week. So it was, I'm not, it's not something I think is, going to drive things one way or the other as far as getting the work done. But I brought it forth simply due consideration for our steering committee members. Yes.
Your Worship, I wonder if we couldn't do something like PAC, for instance, has been on hold probably for over a year now. And I wonder if we do and then see what involved could be from them. Maybe they would be the ones that are sort of, they wouldn't really be justifying it. Hopefully that, they've approved the plan, and then hopefully, I guess they could confirm that the MBS and land use bylaw are consistent with what the plan calls. If you don't disband it, maybe we just won't until we actually get a draft.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question for you to Don. Don, there were engagement phases for the land use policy as well, correct? Outside of the formal PAC processes.
Through the mayor, there's up to 4 public engagements for the draft MBS and LUB. So it would be a public information meeting for sure, and up to 4 public engagements. So we could do more.
But was there any intake designated outside of the PAC process? I'm just failing to recall. No. Okay.
So if there's not a particular will to do anything further with this, they are, it's as is indicated in the information, they stay intact unless it's the will of council that they be otherwise. So we certainly have the authority to conclude their job at this point. But if there seem to be some function that will benefit keeping them in place, then that is certainly the default position, and what it looks like we will be doing. And we'll leave it with Ms. Sutherland to determine, there would see the need for them to meet, and perhaps communicating what that might look like for them in the future, given the difference, the shifting in gears of the Project Lunenburg. So that discussion concluded. We'll move on to Public Works and the discussion on the Nova Scotia Environment Information about process to expand town's watershed boundary to include the full natural watershed and watershed land management plan, and discussion on those topics.
Your Worship, I just wanted to note that Mr. Tiller's available by Zoom, so he is waiting online if you want him to comment on any of these items.
Thank you. It's good to know since we're in that section. So we did have some correspondence from Department of Environment staff with respect to our queries. We were concerned about the watershed boundary. Coming out of our discussion following the review that we had asked to be conducted of our watershed protection plan or water source protection plan. And so there is a process that we would need to initiate. And that sort of also led naturally to a discussion of land management and a fuller plan to ensure that the guidelines that are set out in the source water protection plan are followed. And I guess it's we're now at a point where we are looking at how we best do that, and we may need some outside assistance to help the current staff complement, and if we wish to look at these things more fully or see how we might do better by the source water protection plan that is currently in place. Thoughts? Yes, Deputy Mayor?
You were just been reading the document, you know, or what they're suggesting. I have a couple of thoughts. What I think it was 2010 B that we come up with the first one. I mean, it was tough sledding as far as you know, getting the landowners in line, not in line, long term. Just make sure that if we do that, we're not jeopardizing what we already have. You know, like if it was saying, okay, you have to cancel what you have now and then we start over again, I don't want to do that. But I would like to see us at least put in the application if it's not too complicated, I guess, because I think it's really important that we even if it takes us the next 3 or 4 years to get it done, you know, it's something that needs to be done. And although again, I just caution us on the, it does suggest that we do need to get cooperation. We need to get input from the landowners that would be affected, and you know that'll take some time, and time for not just council but certain members of council as well that will be on this, you know, this source water protection committee. So, but I think we should go to the next step if it's, you know, if it's a question of putting in an application and explaining why we need this. I think it's worth doing.
Well, I think further to what you're saying, though, I think it does. I'm not sure about the risk factor is something I would want to check out for sure as well. But the idea of just putting in an application necessarily involves public consultation, and I'm not sure what that is, but that certainly is more than us just filling out a form. We would have to indicate that there was some public consultation taking place, and you know, so I really think this is an area that calls for some specialized expertise to decide if we should put in an application to extend our watershed protection area beyond where it is now, which doesn't include the entire natural watershed, how important that is, why it deviates where it does. Maybe there was good reason for that back in the day that we're not aware of, and maybe you know, the need isn't as great as we fear it may be to expand to include the natural watershed. But if there is a real strong case to be made for expanding to the natural watershed, then I think we would benefit from having some expert knowledge and you know, arguments that would go a long way in whatever public consultation would then need to be undertaken as part of the application process to do that.
Just a point, Your Worship, you know, the answer to that may well be, or part of the answer might be with you know, this flood water system that we've contracted with. That and I'm not sure if is it LIDAR or LINAR? Anyways, whatever it is, that you know, if the ranging laser stuff that they do would actually take in that there's like area, I don't know, but if it did, it it would certainly give us all of the elevations around the lake and give us exactly where the boundary should be. And that technology just didn't exist, you know, when that first designated area was developed. So, you know, maybe we could ask the engineer to look into, you know, does this this ranging information, does it include that there's like
LiDAR, L-I-D-A.
LiDAR.
Sorry, I was having a hard time thinking what you were referring to.
Yeah, but if it did include it, I think that would give us a lot of information.
Yes, Councillor Sir.
Thank you, Richard. Well, the default step one in these instances is always to get a staff report and recommendation. So I'll move that we get a staff report and recommendation on this.
And thank you. Can I ask for just to flesh out on this, like on, on expanding?
Yeah.
On the.
I'm making application whether to do it.
On
You can write it up.
So a motion to have a staff report has been made on how to move forward with further protections of the watershed. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Mosier, thank you.
Second, that, Your Worship, sort of for discussion. I do have a comment to
Please go ahead.
contribute. I don't think it should be the question of whether we, you know, the protection of our drinking water is important. I don't think it's a question of whether we should apply for the expansion of our watershed. I wouldn't say that we need some expertise in it. So, I mean, I think the question is, yes, we should want to be able to expand our watershed to protect our drinking water. And I think, you know, maybe looking into some expertise to help us with that. That would be, I think that's really what we should be voting on.
So perhaps, Ms. Ryan, can I ask you to share with us what you've captured by way of motion and see if we need to flesh it out or amend?
Moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Mosier, that the staff report be prepared about how to move this project forward for the potential expansion of the protected watershed, utilizing external resources as required in future. Warm?
Staff report on how to move the project forward, potentially expanding, is that what you had said?
Yes, yep.
Potentially expanding town's watershed boundary. And maybe we could just leave it at that and they could advise what would be required to do that. Because they may well say, you know, we need to know an expert in environmental science or landscape, something or other, or whatever.
I guess I just question the potential of expansion. I just think that would almost be like a slam dunk. That's what we should want to do if it's possible.
I don't disagree, but I think that they should, that we'd be well served by having them tell us that, that's really advisable and you should do this.
I just note that the motion also says how, not whether. The motion says how to expand our watershed, not whether to.
Yeah.
I mean, I could strike the word potentially, worship. I don't think it's, again, it's obviously it's forward thinking. It's something that needs to be done. I think you're quite right. External resources are going to be required. And I think you've also talked about active land management as well too. It's not only expanding the boundary, but how do you physically protect them on site? Do you patrol the area periodically? As we know, some other utilities with greater resources do. And I think it's a very worthwhile discussion and analysis to do. And also the financing of that potentially, without saying the word potential.
Right. So I think getting the process and how we go about the process, and what would be involved and what we need to do it would be is the question that we're voting on right now. You've also been talking about sort of the second part of this this agenda item, which I think, except in some regards, very much related, but perhaps just needs some specific direction as well. because we talked about that. Unless people are thinking that's all going to be wrapped up, or you want to add language to ensure it's wrapped up in the first motion. So we're talking about, expanding the watershed one right now, but yes, Councilor Mitchell.
Well, I think it's, we talked about this for, our second council as well, and I think, it should be an elevated priority, for future activity here for the council.
The land management.
Management protection, the whole thing.
Mhm.
I think that's the more priority.
I guess just for the interest of the motion that we have now, I don't know that that motion captures that. I was going to say perhaps we could deal with that in a separate motion. Yeah, sure.
So moved and seconded that a staff report be prepared about how to move this project forward for the expansion and land management of the protected watershed, utilizing external resources as required and financing of same.
Okay, so that's wrapping it into this. So that would be one staff report that would deal with both. And that's acceptable to the group. Yeah. The question's been called and everyone's comfortable with the motion as it was read. So all in favor? Any opposed? No, it's all in favor. So motion is carried. And we'll look forward, someone will look forward to receiving that report. I'm sure it's not going to be a simple one to prepare. Much more direct item is next on our agenda, the LGBTQ plus crosswalk painting costs review. And this was a lovely project we had envisioned happening and sort of got lost in the details and logistics, but we have the information, some more information. Yes, Councillor Visser.
Thank you, Rich. Well, unrelated to the motion, we're coming up in an hour now, so maybe after this, I'd suggest we go to our priority items, so we make sure we get everything in.
So thoughts on crosswalks then? Yes, Councillor Mosher.
Thank you, Roger. Well, it's a great idea. I know, it costs some labor and all that in there, but I thought that's going to be a sort of council project, and I think that would be an awesome team building project for a new council to put together. So, and probably this isn't the right time here to do that, so I'm assuming that, I was assuming that maybe fall, but either way, I think it's a good project, team building project for the new council.
So I will call the meeting back to order after our brief recess. And we are in the agenda item 7B3 is the next one. We have our town engineer to provide some updates on solar initiatives, which was a long-standing item on the chart of information to be brought forward to us. So perhaps if Mr. Tillard is there and can speak to us, he is attending via Zoom. I invite him to give us an update on where things are with solar initiatives.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Hopefully you can hear me. I can hear you guys fine now. It was off and on there for a while. The solar project, we did have a look at that. Paul Bracken had some early investigations around the potential for solar projects, and that's pretty well as far as we've gotten because of other things sort of interfered with the possibility of bringing these forward. There are, and I don't really have details, but there are generally a few things that were identified as good potential. As we do own, real estate in the town, there would be good potential for development of solar projects. Basically, it was dropped for the rest of the remainder of this year because there was just simply not enough time to try to put this together. There are funding sources available. I really don't know to what extent they would fund projects, but there are outside sources available for supporting these type of projects. And it's something we could certainly look to undertake further investigation for next year. As I will add one comment, as they are, reasonably complex technical projects, it's probably something that would need outside support to, flesh out the potential projects and exactly what they entail, so we could actually end up with good, robust descriptions of what potential there is and the costing of the projects as well. So as it stands now, there's no current activity other than the initial investigation, but it is something we can look at for next year, and looking for outside support that we would throw into the budget discussions for next year.
Thank you very much for that. I suspected it was perhaps a bit beyond our scope, and precisely why I thought perhaps we should revisit this at the moment. As you've noted, Mr. Tillard, this is an area that's very popular and has received some attention with our discussions through Project Lunenburg and the Comprehensive Community Plan. Something this council identified some time ago as being a way we would like to move forward, and just how to do that has been obviously causing some difficulties in making some progress. So just wanting council to have an update on that at this stage, and whether it's any further direction to be given by this council is a question for the individuals in the room right now, for possibility for staff report on what those resources might need to be perhaps, or that it's just left with the incoming council to determine the priority on this initiative. Floor is open. Yes, Councillor Risser.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, exploring a renewable energy district at the Old Time Town site was designated in Project Lunenburg, and the feasibility of that is in the 5-year direction. So I'd say we leave it to the next council to look at that.
Further comments? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
I think that, when we use these solar initiatives, I know that I've just put in a solar system within the last year, but when I look at the possibility of connecting that to the grid, it's almost impossible. It is so complicated and so difficult to sort of, connect it to the grid as opposed to just using it as a backup. And I think we need to look at that as a solar initiative as well, that how can we simplify that so that people want to put in a solar system on their house, never mind doing one down on Star Street, but just, smaller systems. I think that should be part of anything we want to call social or solar initiatives too, is to look at how that works, because it does seem to me that it's being made intentionally difficult so that it's almost impossible to do. So
I certainly don't have expertise to offer on that, but that's one area, as you mentioned, that needs further investigation or explanation to us as to what might be involved in that. Also, Councillor Risser mentioned a solar initiative on Star Street, but this council had previously also discussed solar initiative at our water treatment plant, which is also property we own, so I wouldn't want that. I don't know if that was considered by the consultants or not, something that may have gotten missed in the review of opportunities, but I wouldn't want that necessarily discounted, because it may well be great, it may well not be good. I don't know, but yeah, precisely. Yeah. So yes, Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I think it's something that's important. I think it should be in a phased-in approach. And if we look at experts and say, start here at the water treatment plant, there's a field out there, we can put a bunch of solar panels in, do that. Maybe then the next building might be the rink, or it could be any other buildings in the town that we could put solar panels on, with something phased in and over years, and make it a project, and hopefully it stays on the radar for the new council, and that's a project that they can continue on with, because certainly we haven't, other than discuss it, that's about all we've really done at this point anyways.
It's true, and I think part of the difficulty is that it is a specialized field, and so just looking to our current capacity isn't fair. There needs to be some further input from outside experts on this particular subject. So if there isn't specifically then any further direction, it's been identified as a high priority area of interest in our comprehensive community plan. So we can leave it at that and assume the torch will be taken up by the incoming group. Likewise, water meters, again, it's been a question that's been tossed around frequently, and we'd looked for some further input about whether or not to go ahead with installation of these. Again, this is an area of great interest. It can be very complex if we want to at some point look at tying it in with our sewer rates, and that had been something that had been tossed around as well, looking at water and sewer and their obvious relationship, and what water meters would do, the value to the community, the capital costs. It's a big nut to crack. So I don't know if Mr. Tillard has any advice or commentary to provide for this group on the status of water meters and what's to be done. Welcome.
Yes, Your Worship. Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it's certainly something we've talked about in-house within Public Works numerous times. It is something that I think it's a good project for the town to undertake.
Are you still able to hear us and participate in the meeting?
Yes, I'll try again. Can you hear me? Oh dear. Let me try this. Is the audio working now?
Well, perhaps we'll take this opportunity then to switch gears, and as Councillor Risser pointed out, we do have some items on our agenda that are bolded, which means they are somehow prioritized or time sensitive. So with Council's agreement, we'll move to address those items as they appear on our agenda and move to the bolded items at this point in time. So that would take us down into new business at this stage. Under corporate services, the first is the debenture resolution for long-term borrowing, and we have a staff report provided for us with respect to that. And we have, what is it, two? Oops, no, wrong one. taking some time to come up, but in the meantime, perhaps I can look to Ms. Dagley to speak, oh, there it is, to speak to the report.
I'm going to have to Jack, thank your worship, because my mic doesn't seem to be working. Unless I might need a battery replacement. But at the September 8th meeting, council approved the TDR, or temporary borrowing, for fiscal 2019-20. It is now time to secure that debt with the municipal debenture. And also during the summer months, we received 2 capital equipment purchases that are to be financed with debt. The new dump truck for public works that had been a carryover item from fiscal 2019-20, and the new pumper tanker fire truck. Staff wish to move forward with securing financing for these items now. And in order to proceed, council would need to approve a temporary borrowing resolution for those 2 pieces of equipment that were received this summer, and then 3 separate debenture issue resolutions as outlined in the schedules.
Thank you very much for that. So in our agenda package, we do have detailed resolutions for each borrowing that is required, borrowing resolutions. So perhaps we could move through those in succession. Yes, Councillor Mosher. Moved and seconded by Councillor Risser. Thank you. Any questions or discussion on that? All in favor? And motion is carried, and that is approved. So there's several more. So for the following one, someone to move. Councillor Baughman.
Move that a resolution for pre-approval of debenture insurance subject to interest rate in the amount of $154,000 for a term of 10 years as outlined in Schedule 2. And this would be for the 2019-2020 capital projects.
So for Schedule 2, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Croft, thank you. Any questions on that? All in favor? Motion is unanimously carried. And there are a couple of more.
I can keep going.
Go ahead.
That a resolution for the pre-approval of debenture insurance subject to the interest rate in the amount of $187,100 for a term of 15 years as outlined in Schedule 3.
So moved by Councillor Baughman, seconded by Councillor Mosher. Thank you. Any questions? Further discussion? None required. All in favor? Motion is carried. And finally,
since my mic is on, that a resolution for the pre-approval of debenture insurance subject to interest rate in the amount of $327,550 for a term of 20 years as outlined in Schedule 4. And this would be for the new fire truck.
seconded, moved by Councillor Baughman, seconded by Councillor Croft. Thank you. Long time to pay off that fire truck. So, all in favor? No one is opposed. That motion is carried. So hopefully that addresses the concerns, the requirements of our finance officer and staff. So thank you very much for bringing the necessary details to our attention. And just moving along to the bolded items again. We come to the next bolded item is discussion of Halloween, which is fast approaching, and whether or not there's, I guess, just a general discussion of that fact. Of course, given the public health state of emergency that we remain within, whether or not there's any further courses of action that council should take with respect to that. So I'll open the floor for thoughts, and I guess I've premised that somewhat with the fact that the province has not given any specific direction, and so that they have said that that Halloween is Halloween, and have left it at that, and so we're not obliged to take any further action, but it was felt that perhaps we should make that clear or clarify or identify if there's something we feel that can be done differently. So any thoughts? Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, I was just going to basically say what you said, but some communities are organizing events at their community center and so on, and so it's probably not too late to do that if we wanted to, but be interesting to know what the person on the street is thinking as far as sending their kids out, because it'd be better if the province would have made a statement, would have been really helpful. Because I think it'd be a riot just to organize something at the community center. I have some experience doing that, actually. So, we could have done something there that might have been safer and yet some fun too. But no idea. Just you asked for a comment.
Sure. Well, appreciate that input. Councilor Whistler?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think at this stage, we're going to have to leave this after this meeting with staff and yourself, whether anything can be coordinated. But one thing I just happen to hear about anecdotally is some communities are handing out door hangers with the red, green, red on one side, green on the other, so that if you're welcoming trick-or-treaters, you put it out green. If you're not welcoming people because you're, I presume, immunocompromised or something like that, or self-isolating, you put it out red. I don't know what the printing cost would be. I don't know if that can be turned around, but I had heard that on the radio at some point.
Interesting. It is a dilemma for probably homeowners and people who normally do entertain trick-or-treaters, and wondering whether that's appropriate in this time, and also for the children and their parents to know what's best to do too. Yes, Councillor Croft?
It's probably too late, but I think, Your Worship, we get the message out somehow that if your light's on, then you come knock on the door. If it's not on, stay away or something like that.
Sorry, if your
light is on, your outside light.
Is on.
But other than that, I don't know how you get the message across. But I'm fine leaving it.
Certainly, yeah.
Halloween is Halloween for now.
In the absence of a specific direction from public health, it is difficult to know what's best. Encouraging people to come to one place may create problems that you might not see otherwise. Nice idea to have indications, lights or signs or something to indicate whether or not you're receptive to people coming by. I'm not sure if you should be encouraging people with children to go to places they don't know based on, whether the light's on or not knowing who's put the light on. So, or put the sign out. So I really had a bit of a loss myself too. I would, all good discussion, and I think it's, these things we want to provide leadership and want to give good direction, and I'm not sure we just know what that is at this stage. Yes, Councillor Mosher.
Yeah, I would hope that maybe the province might do something where you'd have a limited time, an hour. At least that way you're in your own neighborhood. It's not like you're, attracting, people from all over the community. You'd be more isolated, I guess, just by force to say, here's the window of trick-or-treating and please respect that. So might be an idea.
No, another good thought. I don't, as I said, it is, we've all, I think, pointed out, we don't have a lot of time when it comes to that. And I know it being election time is, not only, maybe puts more time on members of council, but certainly for staff, some of them are directed attentions to that effort. In the short term, which would be planning time for this kind of thing. But, unless someone wants to formulate something that gives some further direction to staff to carry out, I think we need to leave it with the best judgment of our citizens at this point in time to conduct themselves as they're comfortable in doing and recognizing Halloween. So don't see anyone anxious to sort of try to figure it all out. I'll leave it at that. And we'll move to protective services. And there is a Winnemucca District Fire Department receipt of funding to purchase the fire hall heat pumps and a capital budget approval request for that particular item. So that is 9B1. I think we've done some good work on this to secure some funding out of the ordinary a bit as to how things takes place, but nonetheless a positive development. Yes, Councillor.
I'll move the recommended motion.
So moved by Councillor Risser, seconded by Councillor Croft, that the purchase and installation of heat pump system at Fire Hall Auditorium and Club Room be added to the 2021 capital budget with the funding from the Farm Credit Canada Agri-Spirit Grant. So they've gotten funding for this, so it's wonderful we're able to facilitate it taking place. Is there any further comment or questions? All in favor then? No one opposed, so the motion is unanimously carried and approved. And there's another budgeted item, and that is the under Public Works, so 9C1, unbudgeted capital budget ratification of a replacement air compressor following safety inspection, and there was a report on that and what's needed from us as a result. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, I would move the draft motion. Sometimes the cost of these things astounds me, but then again, I'm not used to dealing in perhaps the level of performance that they need in some of these tools. But it sounds like it's necessary to do, and it's an important piece of equipment for them, and so I would move just a recommendation.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor is moving ratification of the purchase for $4,254 as an addition to our budget, seconded by Councillor Risser. Any further discussion on this? Ready for the question then. All in favor? And no one is opposing or left to oppose, so there isn't no opposition and the motion is carried. And purchase is ratified. Air compression. So at 3:43, we'll move back to where we left off on the agenda. I don't know if the engineer, Mr. Tillard, is available now and able to speak to us. The next two
I can
items.
do that. Your Worship, can you hear me?
We would look to him for input on water meters. So we're back to 7B4 and 5.
Okay, Your Worship, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Tillard, can you hear us?
I can. Oh boy.
He's on mute on the screen. Anyway, there's a line. line through his
Can you hear me?
microphone.
Can you hear me? Hello?
He's talking. I don't know whether I
I'm talking, but the audience can hear me, but I don't think the
Yeah, sorry, Mr.
councilors
Tillett,
can.
if
I
you
will.
can hear us, we cannot hear you. And it does show on the bottom that he is muted, so I'm not sure why that is.
I will call back in. Somebody could send that message. Thank you.
I did ask for forgiveness at the beginning of the meeting, right? So, I don't know if there's anything.
Actually, well, your worship, you can just, either function to one.
I had suggested that to him.
Um,
You'll hear him on the speakerphone.
I'm called back in. Can anyone hear me now?
It's pretty loud when you pump up the volume. Should be okay.
Okay. I will call in.
Well, we'll, again, I guess, in light of taking up time to try to make that happen, perhaps we can move beyond public works to move down to committee meeting minutes, recommendations, reports, and notices, because we do have several items under there that shouldn't take a great deal of time. So under 8A, we had our Audit Committee met on September 17th, 2020. Is it on speaker? Hello, Mr. Tillard, are you there? I can. I'm not sure if everyone else in the room is able to.
That's probably close enough, yeah. Yeah,
So, thank you for joining us, I hope. And we are looking to speak to, ask you to provide us some update and information on the status of discussion on water meters.
Right, so, Your Worship, that's something we have discussed internally a fair amount over the last number of months. It is something that I think the town should most definitely pursue. We have about just under 1,200 private water meters, non-commercial water meters in town. So it's obviously a fairly significant project. How all that gets integrated into billing and everything else not something we've scoped out. And given the size and scale of the project, it's probably another thing that would be great to get some outside help just to put the program together to see what it looks like, get it properly costed, and depending on how I guess we collectively decide to implement it, what is the best way to do the implementation? To try to get it done as in a quick manner, or is something that could drag out for years? I don't know the answer to those questions. But I think just in principle, given the volume of waters that we see being consumed in the town, in the height of summer, we've actually exceeded our 3-day average allowances now again this year for one of the months. I think it was July. I think it's a sensible thing for the town to pursue. The water meters themselves are not horrendously expensive, but when you multiply it by almost 1,200 times, it's a different matter, and also in terms of actually getting them installed, whether we're doing it inside, outside, or how that all works, I'm not too sure. So we haven't really scoped it out. Again, given the size of the thing, it's something that we would like to look at for next year to at least provide the scope, costing, and some implementation plan, and look for outside help to do that.
Thank you for that. Again, certainly not something that will get tended to in this council term, but something that's been on the radar and which does need attention. And again, the size and the magnitude of the issue and the complexity of it when we consider all that needs to be considered does, as Mr. Tiller pointed out, require some outside expertise and input. So again, looking to council to see if we want to do anything as well by way of giving direction to staff so that can be on the docket for future, or if we let it be as it is at the moment. For discussion. Yes, Councillor Mosier.
Well, I would suggest that we should probably have a more detailed report and that will come forward to the next council, and we can take that into consideration. I'd move that if that's acceptable. I'd move that we have a more detailed report for the future council to consider.
Thank you, Council. Seconded by Councillor Risser. So that we have a more detailed report on all that would be involved in looking at the idea of water meters being introduced to the town for those not currently on them. Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Just through to Lisa, perhaps if Lisa could dig out the last comments from the URB as far as water meters, what could be part of that report as well? Thank you.
Sorry. Super windy for my truck all the way downstairs. I actually believe Ms. Renton may have pulled that recently, but it certainly could be incorporated in the report.
It is expected that we would report on the status of the matter at the next rate application. At the time of the last application, which was 3 years ago, Ms. Dagley, perhaps 4. Right. The council of the day indicated, that would have been the previous council, that they did not wish to pursue a residential water meter program at that time. The cost was estimated. I do believe that the assistance of the rate specialist we had for the water rate application at in excess of $600,000. I think cost was definitely concerned. The merits of metering are always well supported, but the magnitude of the project was just beyond the reach of the previous council. I think it is, again, something, though, that would really need external support services with assistance of a company or consultants who have experience in this sort of thing, because you do need to not only do the engineering work and figure out, well, what kind of meters, but how will they be read? And we are increasingly in an electronic age. And thereby, how will those meters, as we hear all about various types of smart meters, how will they feed into billing systems? And then, of course, how do you support that with a water utility rate structure? Because we can't set our own rates, as you know. Any capital acquisitions over $250,000, I believe it is, have to be approved through the board. So there is a formal advertised rate application hearing. Typically, you roll it into some other considerations. Maybe there's some other rate issues that need to be addressed, and just an inflationary increase, or, you know, as it may be required. So there is a lot of specialization that's required behind that to move that report. So we would prepare a preliminary report for your worship that would address those steps and start to put the wheels in motion if that's something the future council wants to propose. But I would say it's not really within the grasp of the current staff to tell you any more than looking at over $600,000, and it's something that the board in future will want us to take another look at.
I'm not misreading the room. I think that laying out all of those things that you just listed is what we would expect to see in a report that would come to the incoming council from staff. I know that it is a complex issue, and I was a part of the council who abandoned the idea 2 terms ago, I guess, because of the cost, but not just the cost, but because of the, I know that it certainly it made an impression on me, the merit of involving or installing water meters was called into question in that its merit is to have a better understanding of who's using the water and how much, and that there be some accountability by, you know, fee structure for that. And yet it's also a very significant base charge for providing that service. And so the change in the amounts that would be charged over and above that base charge would disproportionately fall to full-time permanent residents, families, and people who are perhaps best or least able to pay, and perhaps people that we would least like to impact with that additional cost. So there are factors, social factors like that, that did factor into the decision-making at the time. And so those are things that would want to be considered, you know, in the fuller context of not just the cost, but the impact and who will bear the burden of the additional cost, and you know, what the fuller ramifications of that might be. So right now we're just looking to make sure that the issue can be fully considered by our incoming council by laying out the many variables in this discussion. And I take it I didn't misspeak from the movers and seconders for the motion for a report. Is there any further discussion, comments? Okay, all in favor then? Any opposed? Motion is carried, and we look forward to seeing that report for a new council to consider. Next on our agenda is the Tannery Road Sidewalk project, and Mr. Tour, are you still there and are you able to comment?
I'm hoping you can hear me.
On Tannery Road?
Can you not hear me?
It's still there, so, okay.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can, thank you.
Hello?
Yes, yes. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Good, yes, please, looking to have an update on the Tannery Road Sidewalk project.
Right, so we have finally put together information to look at this as a in-house project, and I'm in the process now of writing a memo which we would present at the next council meeting. I don't have the summary in front of me right now, or I don't have it all collected in front of me right now to talk about specifics. But one thing I would like to point out, this is a fairly lengthy project in terms of us being able to do it in-house, although we may see some cost, will see some cost reduction. We are talking about 8 weeks total work for our crew to try to accomplish that, which obviously has some impact on other works that we would have planned. So I just wanted to throw that out as food for thought in the meantime. But for next council meeting, we will have a memo in front of council.
Are there any other questions that have been reported at this point in time? Would you like to know that's to come back to us? I know it was our direction that would be looked at as an internal project. Yes.
I'm just wondering what the timeline is looking at for completion of a piece for an internal project.
Your worship, could you repeat the question? I can hear you, but not so. I think there's council motion that will.
So looking for, he was asking about the timeline for potential completion. So obviously not this fiscal, given the time of year.
So is it feasible to be looking at next calendar year?
That was what our intention was, to look at this as a project for next fiscal year. And just again, for some food for thought in the meantime, is that we kind of looked at it as two phases. One is to clear it, rub it, and remove trees that need to be removed, and get the gravel down, compacted for the full length. So at that point, we would actually have a usable walking path, and then we would look at doing the concrete placement, and that could be phased in at a different time if it felt necessary to do it that way. And if we could live with a gravel path, there's a possibility of doing that. I know that certainly wasn't the preference of it, because we felt that it was the only way it could be accomplished, but certainly look at it in that fashion. So we have presented it in terms of 2 phases: one to get the base down, which would then still be a usable walking path, and then the second phase would get the concrete in place.
Thank you. Any further questions? There was something else in my mind about that I can see actually, as it is concerned about the logistics leading up to actually doing the work, and whether or not that has a time factor as well, as far as land acquisition and securing all of the necessary arrangements with abutting landowners. So is that part of that report, perhaps? That's what
Your Worship, yes, I was just glad you brought that up. Sorry, I meant to mention that is on the, I'm talking about once the land agreements have been finalized. And from what I have been able to glean out of the records I've seen, there were agreements negotiated, but none of them were executed. But I could see mine, and certainly if they were, they would have been expired by now anyway. And we had also looked at alternate plans in terms of just a little different routing, and had talked to some significant landowners there about that. But it turns out the plan that we have in front of us actually is the pretty well the only workable plan in terms of the routing. Well, those agreements would need to be executed, and obviously nothing would happen until those agreements are in place. And I have no notion as to what the time frame is, because I do not know the landowners. Some certainly ones we had talked to are amenable, so we certainly have to talk to them.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, so that's kind of the original group that we had, that had some diagrams of several years ago.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for Mr. Twitter? Any comments? Looking forward to that memo on next meeting. Thank you. And sort of, I guess that's a segue to, we do have a regular meeting scheduled for the end of the month. This is, of course, after the election, but prior to formal swearing in of the new council, presumably. So we would carry on this to ensure that we're on the business.
Hopefully you all heard me. Thanks. So we're at the end of our scheduled time. We do still have a number of items on the agenda. I guess one that perhaps I would have liked to have seen bolded, but never thought to mention it, is the variance report from staff, but there's other recommendations and so on that have been brought forward. So it's the will of council how we continue, if we continue.
I think Your Worship, we should look at those recommendations so they can get them off the table, I think.
Under the committee work that you're referring to, okay? So if there's no objection, we'll move on, carry on then with 8B, or 8A. I started to mention, but I don't think we got through that, and I don't think there's any particular action from that, just the meeting minutes of our Audit Committee, which met on September 17th. And Again, congratulations to our finance staff and to all staff really who contribute to a very positive report from our auditors. And 8B, Protective Services, September 17th, 2020 meeting minutes, and there's a recommendation there which Councillor Croft will bring forward.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's to recommend to Lunenburg Town Council to approve funding for replacement of the existing number 6 tanker on a 50-50 basis on the understanding that Fire Districts 1 and 2 Commission agreed to cost share the aerial ladder truck on a 40 Commission, 60 town basis, up from a previously agreed cost. And I'll move them. So in 1 second, I'll discuss it further.
By Councillor Risser, yes.
This came up at our last Protective Services meeting, and I think the district was under the understanding this was already a sort of a done deal, but I don't think it ever came to council for that approval type of thing. I think the fire department wanted to start the process, I guess, of replacing the tanker. And the district said, well, until we get this agreement in place, fully agreed upon, that we're not going to contribute it at this time. So in order to proceed, I guess we have to get this officially put as a motion. I believe that's the way I understand it. Is that correct, Pete?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
And Ms. Dagley may have some additional information, Your Worship, from a financial perspective.
Well, I guess I have, as Councillor Croft has indicated, I think the district thought that this was part of the motion when the aerial truck was approved. I have extensively reviewed minutes and have not been able to find anything where there was an actual motion of council to agree to this. I believe that the understanding from the district was that if they moved their sharing percent up from 20% to 40%, which was an increase of about $150,000 worth of funding from them at the time, that would be somewhat equivalent to what the funding would be for 50% of this number 6 tanker when it becomes time to replace it. The number 6 tanker had previously been purchased 100% by the district in the past. Currently, that number 6 tanker, as an FYI, is in the 10-year capital budget at $638,000. So 50% of that would be just over $300,000.
So our fire protection is a huge concern. It's also a huge expense. I was pleased to know that there's a 10-year capital planning instituted. Concerned about huge expenditures annually. We've just approved a debenture borrowing of over $300,000 this year to be paid over a significant number of years. The expense of taxpayers. I would very much like to see a consistent shared arrangement with our districts 1 and 2. The fact that this comes up for negotiation with each significant
are negotiated. Negotiation and hopefully renewal in 2021. So to your point, I think this is something that would be very helpful to discuss with them. It was one of those points, I think, if Councillor Croft recalls, at the table at the time, and we sort of agreed to disagree and move on, execute, lingering opportunities for discussion over some very expensive items, as you pointed out. So it would be good to resolve and to look for an equitable, and I would propose therefore 50-50 funding arrangement. But no doubt, the other very important party to this has differing views and differing firefighting needs, and therefore has taken traditionally the position that 50-50 is not appropriate. So needless to say, there will have to probably be some extended discussions about it.
Deputy Mayor, you have.
No,
Oh,
and Bea might have said it, but when the topic came up at the meeting, I think the district was quite adamant that they're not interested in a 50-50 deal. So, it's not really our decision. It has to be a collective deal. So they don't seem to be interested at all in that.
Well, I guess you got to look at where our tanker gets used most, I guess, is one thing. Do we need a tanker in town? Probably not. But that's probably why originally it was funded as 100% by the district. So, and I can't recall when we bought the new ladder truck, any of that discussion at all about if they increased their portion to 40%, that we could split on a new tanker. I don't recall that at all. I think it was, in my recollection, which is a matter we asked for more, I think, because of the potential of using a ladder truck outside of town could be higher than 20%. So, so I don't know, other than the district arguing the point now that we should be sharing 50-50 on a new expenditure. In my mind, it's questionable whether we should do that. So.
no,
If I may, I think the only thing that I would comment to Councillor Cross' comment was that it may seriously damage the relationship for all future capital projects. If this, that the deal that has already been agreed to is now being changed at this point. That would be my caution.
yes, Council Motion.
Yeah, that would be my sentiment as well. I mean, we could be penny wise and pound foolish, and maybe by giving up a little bit in this particular instance, might be able to gain us a little more, especially if our contract's going to be negotiated next year. So I think it might be in our long-term best interest to probably swallow this one and move forward in a good, with a good relationship as opposed to creating a bad one.
So, go ahead, Councillor.
Just one more question. Sorry, Lisa, we touched on this, but what does 20% of an aerial ladder truck versus 50% of a tanker work out to in the wash?
So the 20% of the aerial truck would have been just under $150,000.
Yeah.
And so they increased it to almost $300,000 for
Yeah.
the 40%. Currently, with the amount that is on the 10-year capital budget, and I don't know if that, I probably received that from the fire department, that 50% would be $319,000.
So we're losing 150K.
Yeah.
Or 170K. Okay.
For me, it's a bigger question. I don't, whether or not we even need a tanker truck. I don't know, it's on the books, but you put things, you project and you determine whether or not but the frequency of large scale expenditures for our fire department is basically it's significant, it's large. And I don't know that there's the oversight and they don't, you know, the procurement is handled a little differently. Through the department, they do things source. Just I find it challenging to simply on a negotiation of, you know, or you know, when somebody's miffing somebody that we are going to expend that amount of taxpayers' money. It's something I think we need to look very seriously about. I'm not. The 50-50, I actually don't have any trouble with because that's where I think we should be on everything. But I think it's if we approve this, I think we need to take that next step and look at giving direction to have some further work done so that we're not looking at this kind of thing in the future because I think it's, you know, needs to be remedied. Yes, Councillor Croft.
Your Worship, I think if we approve this, I agree with you, we move forward and the next Protective Services Committee can look at coming up with a schedule that's more realistic for truck replacements. You know, our fire department seems adamant that every 20 years the truck has to be replaced, and I'm not fully agreed with that, but I guess it depends on how much the truck gets used, and a tanker, I think, would probably get a lot of use and a lot of wear on it, pounding over the roads, hauling water. But again, well, I think the next Protective Service Committee should move forward with your suggestion that they seriously look at how this schedule is set up, type of thing, for replacement. I know we've struggled with that and have a schedule in place, but it's been questionable that we keep pushing some purchases off a year or two at the time. So.
And I guess to that, Councillor Cross, I think the district has even been asking for that same thing as well, is that, you know, meeting the demands of the rigorous 20-year replacement schedule is challenging for them as well. So I think they would be all in agreement to consider that as well.
Yeah.
And I guess I just also want to mention that we had last year established a fire truck replacement reserve when we were doing our budget deliberations. So just a reminder about that. I know we had already just, you know, 5 minutes ago here in the council meeting, but it obviously that takes a while to build up, and the proceeds from the surplus vehicles that are sold with this replacement are going to build that, you know, as part of that establishment of that reserve. But the reserve was built based on that, this number 6 tanker being a district truck, because that was the information we had at the time. So we will need to make some adjustments for that if this motion moves forward.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and precisely, I know the last Protective Services Committee meeting I attended, there was great discussion about process, and it was actually at the initiation of the district questioning the frequency of purchase and the need and some system to better assess that and evaluate that for, you know, for our purposes, not being experts in the field or having any specific knowledge of that equipment requirements. So I don't know where that is, but I know that there were inquiries made of the Protective Services Committee, and so I don't know if there's any sort of, and I guess that to my earlier point of if we approve this, we need to know that it's going to, that something else is going to happen. Alternatively, I don't know if there's anything currently in the works, or if there's some language we could provide to encourage that, or to try to initiate or ensure that does happen. Can you offer any help with that?
I think your worship, the district had asked to have the vehicle replacement schedule back on the agenda for discussion, and in maybe a sideline conversation, there can be a discussion generally about the agreement and its renewal, not at the committee table necessarily, but otherwise making contact. So I think they can certainly be pursued at the next meeting, the next quarterly meeting.
So we could request that the vehicle replacement schedule be established and and a review of the, is that on the books currently? The rediscussion, the opening up of the arrangement. Is that?
Would be done outside the confines of the committee meeting, but
Right.
definitely to make contact about this. And again, Your Worship, in fairness to the fire department, they are concerned about production delays at plants for equipment, and I know that's part of what precipitated this at the last meeting, just before the meeting, that they wanted to discuss this because they said at the plants where these pieces of equipment are fabricated, there's such a lead time, and they thought it was best to move things ahead. Perhaps a little too quickly, that there hadn't been, that fuller discussion and background analysis that you're looking for now. So I think that's understandable. I'm sure they'll appreciate that's, both parties are looking for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Your Worship, I think that part of the conversation has got to be what Danny touched on as far as, the current attitude that after 20 years they have to be replaced. When you look at a lot of the volunteer fire departments in the province where they list their equipment, they're talking about 1975 trucks, 1982 trucks. We just assume that they have to be replaced when they're 20 years old. But if they're not getting a lot of use and so on, and there may be some insurance implications, I'm not sure. But I think that's got to be one of the topics before we even talk about funding, come up with a definitive policy as far as replacement of trucks. And maybe it's not just based on time, length of service. Taken into as well.
So vehicle replacement schedule and procurement policy for hard equipment, and then further to that, separately is discussion on arrangement with our partners, which will be outside of the context of the committee. Yes.
Well, I think by approving this motion doesn't mean we're going to replace an order for a fire truck right away. I think it just confirms the commitment that we're going to make a 50-50 agreement on this. I know the fire department wanted to place an order right away for a new tanker, and I think delivery was something, if I'm correct, it was like 2022 or something like that, or 2023, I can't remember exactly. So they wanted us to sort of get pre-approved, to not to spend the money now, but just to get it in motion. So I think just by doing this, it just makes a commitment that we'll share 50% once that time comes.
So to put on a positive spin on what may seem to be, by some very negative perspective that I brought to this whole discussion, is the fact that I think approving this, it may be a sign of good faith in approving 50-50, in that, as I mentioned earlier, I think that's appropriate going forward, and with the understanding that that's the expectation at this point for this particular piece of equipment, which traditionally we have not cost shared on. Hopefully that will put us in a good position to speak favorably about where it goes from there. But the motion currently just deals with this recommendation that's before us. So is there any further discussion on that? Question's been called, so all in favor? Motion is approved for that cost sharing as indicated in the recommendation. So I do think it would be helpful to give some further direction, as we were just discussing, that we would like to have vehicle replacement schedule and procurement policy ensured that that's on the schedule or the Protective Services Committee agenda for the upcoming group, and that we have it. We understand that staff will be negotiating or discussing the arrangement with our partners in fire service.
Yes, that's right, Your Worship. I have it noted as consensus that the negotiations regarding the renewal of the agreement should be scheduled in the near future as well. The replacement schedule of fire trucks and town purchasing policy will be discussed at the next committee meeting.
Is that fair, everyone? Okay, thanks very much. So there is one other recommendation from the Heritage Advisory Committee, Councillor Mosier.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's recommended that council rescind the current substantial alteration guidelines as per attachment A and concurrently adopt a new revised substantial alteration guidelines as per attachment B, Schedule B. And I would so move that recommendation.
By Councillor Mosier, the recommendation. Is there a seconder? Councillor Bachman, thank you. Trying to get that one up. Is there any additional information that would be helpful for those of us that weren't a part of that committee? As I'm waiting for it to come up, sorry.
And Mr. McDonald is available, I believe,
Oh, good.
somehow or other.
Mr. McDonald, are you with us on Zoom?
Yes, Your Worship, I'm here. Can everybody hear me okay? Hello? Are you able to hear me?
Oh, there.
Hi.
Hello, Mr. McDonald.
Hello?
We have the recommendation. I don't think we can hear you, though.
Oh. Well, should I come down? I can come down.
You see, cannot hear you.
I don't know why it's not working.
Down? That's a shame. So I was there was a lot of information with this, and I kind of got lost in it a bit, so.
It's a big fact. I mean, in some regard, it contradicts a little bit of some of the things that we've already done.
Yeah, so it'd be helpful to get. Thank you for coming down, Arthur.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not working.
No.
Here's the chair and work and I go around this whole guy.
So we were just saying that it's a lot of information, and we welcome your input on to sort of summarize it for us as best you're able.
Well, I'll do a quick summary. Oh, thank you. Can you all hear me now? I'll do a quick summary. The basic intent of this report is to amend the guidelines for substantial alterations to municipal heritage properties to enable them to be looked at and considered by the heritage officer without the necessity of proceeding to council each time. So there's a current list of substantial alterations, and I amended it in Schedule B. If we can scroll down to Schedule B. Is Heather around? Oh. And I highlighted the changes as outlined in red. So basically, the list of substantial alterations have been changed to add at the end of each one, unless said development is in conformance with the design guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District. So as long as the proposal by the developer meets the guidelines of the substantial alterations or the design guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District, then it would not be considered a substantial alteration, and therefore no heritage permit by council would be required. So it kind of simplifies the process, and I think it makes it easier for council as well as the citizens of Lunenburg. So I'm recommending council amend the substantial alteration guidelines, and the committee passed a favorable recommendation for council's consideration as well.
Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded that recommendation. I guess I'm only confused that I thought it already was. If it wasn't a substantial, I thought you could, but you can't. It still has to come.
If it's determined to be not substantial alteration, then a letter would be just issued by the heritage officer saying that no heritage permit is required. If they're in the Heritage Conservation District, they will still require a certificate of appropriateness under the district bylaw. But this will apply to designated municipal heritage properties in the district as well as outside the district. So for those properties outside the district, for example, we had an application from 10 Falkland Street for a ramp addition that had to come to council because it was determined under these guidelines to be a substantial alteration, even though the design met the design guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District. So in the future, those proposals would not need to come forward to council for their consideration. So it's trying to simplify the process.
Simplification is good. So any questions then, Mr. McDonald, for the discussion on the motion? All in favor? No one to oppose, then the motion is carried and the recommendation is approved.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much for coming down. So the next is just a joint Occupational Health and Safety Committee meeting minutes of October 1st. And those are for our information. I just want to mention that it's extremely important and we've been making great progress in ensuring the safety of our employees through formal processes, and good on staff for making taking this very seriously and making great progress from what we can tell from the minutes. If we're good to carry on, we're getting near the end of things, so it'd be nice if we can conclude the business for today. 9A, corporate services, the Social Public Libraries request for the use of the Lunenburg Heritage Bandstand for Lunenburg Lit Fest and their outdoor school event, which happened a week or so ago. Yes.
I was going to say, if I'm reading this right, this is a while back,
Yes.
so I would move the recommendation.
So the use of the donating the use of, yeah, rather than charging them for saying, and you're seconding that, Councillor Wizard. The deputy mayor.
So any discussion, Card, on this?
Oh, yeah? It was great to see. There was lots of people on the hill. Yeah, it was nice to see. So yeah, good things to encourage. So yeah.
Just a further comment, at the last mayors and deputies meeting and stuff, they were talking about having to come up with activities that the community can get involved with because of the pandemic and stuff. And, you know, the bandstand is certainly an excellent opportunity. I wonder if we should just make this a policy that, you know, that for educational use or nonprofit group events and stuff, that we would make it available. You know, it's not big money, and it would promote, you know, activities that perhaps would get people a little bit of fresh air and a little bit of getting out as well. So just a thought.
No, it's a good thought. Something that I, you know, like, that's a nice thing to look forward to now that we're responsible for it and we can make those kind of opportunities available. Hopefully that's something that'll be taken up going forward. We did vote? We did get this for the vote? Okay. Thank you. Did we not vote? No? Okay. Okay. Sorry. So, any favor? And it's unanimously approved, as I knew it would be. You're welcome.
Worship, did you want to pursue something like that though, or for maybe for the next meeting, discussion about expanded uses free of charge, or is that getting into a little
Was thrown out by the deputy mayor as a
denser discussion?
worthy of discussion. Want it for-
I would think in the interest of time that it would be a very quick conversation, and if that requires a motion, that we're.
Or could put it on the next agenda, Your Worship. I think it's very worthy of pursuit and something with the
Yeah.
Board of Trade we could take up.
Yeah.
You know, the good success of Montague Street and what was done there, and nice opportunities like this. Creating more outdoor venues even during the winter months might be ideal.
And there's probably not going to be a lot of usage over the winter, so, you know, it could be just left as an idea for normal.
Okay, sorry, Your Worship.
No, okay. Just pointing out as well, next is the Social Public Libraries Board vacancy that was created by the resignation of our very faithful and dedicated member, Sarah Lockheed, who was appointed to that position, I think, started this term perhaps, or close to. Oh, maybe even the former one? Yes, because she was very involved with the whole library move, which took place in 2018, but I wasn't sure how. Anyway, so yeah, she was a stellar appointment, but now is resigned. So that is a standing appointment that is included in our policy of appointment lists. But yes.
I'll move we advertise for the vacancy.
And should we do that immediately? Is that what you're thinking, or as part of a larger slate? That's what I'm wondering, if we just kind of hold off a bit and roll it all into that. But
Your Worship, Ms. Lockheed was encouraging of a council appointment and had spoken about how the meetings are more compressed and at a more reasonable hour. I think they were, you know, at a difficult time in the evening and they conflicted with the council meeting. So might also be something that council wished to consider. I think they're only like 45 minutes every 2 months.
yeah, no, that's a very good point and relevant to, because Council Whistler wouldn't have been aware. I think just about every other council has a council appointee to that board. But we had not, we had always traditionally for many, many years, and in my first 2 terms for sure, the meetings conflicted.
Because I remember being appointed to that, and yet their meetings were the same night as our council meetings,
Well,
so we changed it, yeah.
Which is why.
So we might go back if
I was just going to say, that's why we need the external appointment.
Yeah.
Because their meetings continue to conflict with ours, and it was impossible to, or.
Two very good people too.
Yeah.
Yes, we have. Well, they need meetings.
They were much more knowledgeable.
You gotta read first to get that.
But that's, yeah, no, good, we did appoint from council, but that got to be problematic, so we've made it an external appointment, but now that's changed, so whether or not we advertise or simply roll this into our appointments with the upcoming council.
Okay.
At that time.
Having gotten that, I'll move that we defer this and roll it into the appointments that are necessary to make after the election. And then at that time, we can figure out whether it needs to be a council or not.
Second, Councilor Mosher, any further discussion on this? Question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion's carried. Well done. Venture. So the last on our agenda is the variance report, which is a very significant document, very important. So Ms. Dagley, would you like to highlight that for us?
Certainly, and Your Worship. So this is the variance report is prepared for council's information. This is the first variance report for fiscal 2021. It goes up to August 31st. They will be monthly from this point forward for the rest of the fiscal year. As noted in the cover memo, based on current projections, it is estimated that the town's general operations will have a deficit at year end of approximately $30,000. Our staff will continue to closely monitor revenues and expenses to attempt to mitigate this without impacting service levels. Again, there's the traditional things that are in the variance report, capital status report, the summary, report about due transfer tax and tax collections and parking. We are happy to answer any questions for our council. So yes, sorry, go ahead, Councilor Moser.
Well, I just have one question to Lisa. So we're forecasting a $30,000 deficit. So would it be possible then for staff to bring forward some recommendations on how to mitigate that $30,000?
Well, we certainly could bring forward some. They will probably have some impact on service levels because anything that would not impact service levels, we would have already been adjusting. Realizing that we're at the point where most of our summer works is already been completed, and it is hard to know what the winter might or might not bring. So some of that may change organically because of the nature of winter, but it also may get worse as a result. And also we're at just the beginning of the opening of the arena and what those revenues may or may not look like. But certainly that's part of the variance process that going forward that we will be looking at those continuously to see where we can make adjustments.
And that's what I'm thinking in the future, especially with the time of year.
And I've already highlighted some already, like certain ones that I've told staff, like these have already been cut, and if something is happening with this, we need to watch these ones. So that is already happening internally with staff.
The one thing that was touched on before, but which wasn't, I don't think formally addressed, was at the time when we were discussing arena opening, and it was whether or not there was opportunity to appeal to our municipal neighbors who are also frequent users of our arena, whether or not there would be opportunity for them to provide some additional assistance with the understanding that these are unprecedented circumstances. They certainly have reached out in a big way to charitable organizations and have made funding available in ways that we simply don't have the capacity to do. And so there may be capacity on their end, and they may be open to receiving a request for further funding over and above what they would have given us, with the understanding that we're projecting this given the current circumstances. So I'm not sure the appropriate way to go about that, whether it be political route or staff route. But I would suggest that, and we had indicated that that's worthwhile doing, at least to investigate. So perhaps the understanding of council and staff that would be one avenue that is well worth pursuing.
MODL was aware of the additional costs that we were looking at. And again, they brought it up. They said that we understand, and so we don't want to be blindsided by a request. So we said, okay, you're going to get a request. So, even if it ended up being 20% of the cost, then it would be significant and worth doing. And I want to take this opportunity to mention that another comment came up with this anti-racism. I know it's not related, but if I could just quickly throw that in. It turns out that all of our neighbors are going through a similar process as far as committees of anti-racism, and it was agreed that we would discuss coming up with a collective policy. And I just want to throw that out just because I thought it was significant. Thank you.
So I don't know that we need a formal motion to that regard, that we will just with the understanding of the room that that's.
You should just call the Carolyn.
So we will check that out, and I'll ask staff to ensure we work collaboratively to make that ask. So thank you very much, Lisa. This is very important information. It's very good to know where we are and to know what's forthcoming, and very helpful. And it would be good to receive it on plate here on the end. great for incoming council to get a handle on things, just as it is for us. So sorry, I lost my agenda in the shuffle, but I think we've dealt with the next several items because they were bolded, so we've dealt with them earlier. There is nothing to bring forward from our in-council, in-camera meeting on October 8th, still nothing.
Well, just generally, we've heard nothing.
Yes, so there's been nothing, no response from that, so nothing to report. So I would gladly entertain a motion to adjourn at this point. Councillor Issler moving the adjournment, seconded by Councillor Croft. All in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone.
And it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It has. So, no.